Hello, this is looking at location for Unit 2. Now, if you are planning on doing your exam in 2006, you will know location very well because you had it as part of your controlled assessment. But this is a Unit 2 focus, so it's looking at larger businesses and it's looking at international locations as well, which is important to cover because this is not something that you would have looked at. Well, I'm assuming that you wouldn't have looked at that when you were doing your controlled assessment. So, this is a slide that we saw in my Unit 1 presentation video. So these are all the factors that we've got to consider when we're thinking about location. So the infrastructure, so for customers, employees, broadband, gas, electricity, water, parking, the actual physical space that you have, financial issues, so the cost, wage levels, transport costs, cost of materials, income levels in the area if you're selling to customers in those areas, any grants available, government grants, incentives to locate in that area, qualitative factors as well. There will be owners of this business. Probably with an LTD, you're going to get more qualitative considerations coming into it because I'm assuming that LTD might be still kind of family run. All the shareholders are known, well, they would be because shareholders can only be friends and family, but they're probably more taken into consideration lifestyle choices, whereas with a PLC, that's going to be shares sold on a stock market, and therefore you're more likely to just take into consideration the financial factors rather than the lifestyle of the majority shareholder. And the market, how close you are to customers, close you are to suppliers, close you are to competitors. Some businesses want to be close to competitors. You know, if we think about shopping malls, those are lots of shops that are all competitors theoretically, but they like to be close to each other so that it creates a one-stop shop for customers. So it's very convenient for customers. Some businesses don't want to be very close to competitors because it reduces the amount of revenue they have. So pet stores, shops that sell pet food and things like that, and accessories and dog beds and things like that, they probably don't want to be very near to other pet stores because someone's very unlikely to go shopping around them all. They'll just pick one and go to them. So remember, when you're analysing these location factors, you need to be able to explain the link. So here I've chosen one, and I did this as well. This is the same slide from the Unit 1 presentation, but transport links for customers are important because if we have better links and some examples there, it means it's more convenient for customers and we get more customers, more sales, more revenue. Hopefully this leads to more profit. So this is the new part coming into Unit 2. So the best location is one which is going to maximise profit. Now, there's two sides to profit. We can maximise revenue. So the best location is going to be where there are going to be either lots of customers, so we're going to get lots of sales. So in the case of shopping malls, as I was talking about before, there's going to be lots of customers descending on shopping malls because there's lots of other shops there, and you might have a bigger chance of selling a higher quantity. Remember though, revenue is not just the quantity, it's the price as well. So in a more upmarket place, you might have consumers willing to pay a higher price. So if we think about London and maybe Oxford Street in London, which is one of the main shopping areas, we're going to get a huge quantity of people visiting that area. It's always very, very busy. So you're going to get that quantity side increased. But also you're going to have your more affluent shoppers there as well because London is an expensive area, especially in the centre. You don't go to Oxford Circus or Oxford Street to maybe get a cheap deal. You know you're going to pay a relatively high price for the products there. So that could be a place where shops are really maximising their revenue there, and that's why we see these big stores like Topshop have a huge store there, and others as well. I can't think of all of them off the top of my head. Selfridges is near there, Bond Street. The other side to maximising profit is minimising costs. So we want to think about where your rent's going to be cheapest, where your wages are going to be cheapest, where your utility bills are going to be cheapest, where there are subsidies or grants given from the government, because that can reduce your costs as well. Now this seems like a very simple diagram, doesn't it? Like simple, maximize profit, maximize revenue, minimize costs are done. But the problem is that often these areas where you're going to maximize your revenue are areas where your costs are actually going to be high as well. And maybe the places where you're going to minimize your costs, where the rent is really cheap, you're not going to have many customers around. So that's a bit of a dilemma for businesses, where it's going to be busy with lots of customers, it's also going to cost a lot. However, with new internet businesses, e-commerce, you tend to be able to get cheap rent in areas that aren't very populated, because you're going to send out the products to the customers once they order them, so you don't necessarily need to be in very populated areas. So that's been a new development in the last 20 years that we've seen with e-commerce developing, and it means that there's not such a conflict between wanting to be in an area where it's really populated with customers, but also wanting to reduce those rent costs. So here are some key terms as well that you need to know, especially for Unit 2. So globalisation is the increasing trend for goods to be traded internationally and for companies to locate abroad. It can also mean services as well. We have lots of services that are traded internationally. So lots of people come to the UK because we're very well known for educational services, especially our universities. So lots of foreign people want to come and study in the UK, and that's a sign of globalisation, people using those services. Offshoring is making products or parts of products in other countries. So you might have one part of your product, if it's a car, maybe the engine assembled in a different part of the world. And we'll look at some reasons for that in a second. And multinational, or sometimes called transnational, is a business with operations in more than one country. So these are actually easier if I give you some examples. So I did actually steal a slide from someone from Welsh Board. So thank you very much, Welsh Board, for giving me this slide, or for allowing me to take it. So these are some examples of globalisation. Heineken beer export their beer to 170 countries, or around about that number. McDonald's and Pizza Hut have overseas franchises, so it's very hard to go to places that don't have McDonald's. I think all the places that I've ever been in the world, there have been a McDonald's there, because they're really a globalised brand these days. And Honda and Toyota are Japanese firms, but they have manufacturing facilities in other countries. They actually have manufacturing facilities in the UK as well for specific reasons. We'll have a look at that in a second. I went to China a few years ago, and I was visiting. This was a picture taken in Beijing, actually, and it was a lovely lake, and I looked to my side and I saw this really ornate building, and it was Starbucks, and I was absolutely amazed that we had this really American brand in China, in this very Chinese looking building, actually. So it's this blending of this American culture and Chinese coming together. So car industry as well. Here's a picture of quite an old-fashioned car, it looks like, but the car industry tends to be very global because we get a lot of offshoring, lots of production happening in lots of different countries. So all the components being built in places where it's cheapest to build them, maybe where they're very specialized and skilled in building them, and then they're bringing them together to make the finished product. So it used to be, years ago, it would have been that all of these products would have been made in one country. We used to have a British car industry as well, and that's pretty much all gone. We do have car manufacturing facilities in the UK, like Toyota, Honda, Jaguar, Land Rover as well, but they're not owned by British companies. But there would have been a time when all of these components of a car would have been made in one country, but not so much now. They're being in the kind of global economy, made in the global economy. So why do we do this? Okay, so cheapen materials. You might be able to access cheaper materials in other countries. The country's workforce may be more skilled in those particular production techniques. You may also get cheaper labour costs. We see a lot of our clothes made in Asia these days, where there's a lower average wage over there. You may want to think about exporting your products to other countries, if we're thinking about Heineken, who export to those 170 countries, you can access a larger market. There's more people in the world than there are just in the UK, obviously. So you can access more people, that's more sales, more revenue. And we can also avoid trade barriers sometimes. So if I go back to this slide here, Honda and Toyota, actually, I'm going to circle those ones. They set up in the UK because they can actually avoid EU trade barriers. So if they manufacture these cars in the UK, it kind of becomes a UK product. And so they can export it to France, Spain, any country in the EU for that matter, without having to pay tariffs or be subject to things that we call quotas. Now, tariffs and quotas add to the production cost. It increases the price of these products, so it makes them less competitive. So if you can actually put your production facility in a country which has a trading bloc, the EU is one of the most well known, then you can get around these trading blocks. So say if we're a British company and we're trying to export to America, if we export our products to America, we would have to pay tariffs, there's quotas, those types of things. But if we set up a production facility in America, that's one of the ways that we could avoid having to pay those tariffs or be subject to quotas. Quotas are just limits on the amount that you can export to a country. So if I skip ahead now, so sounds great so far, but there are problems. Language and communication problems. So this is actually going to be what we call a diseconomy of scale. So one of the problems of getting bigger, you not only are you going to be trading in different countries, so obviously different languages, different cultures, but you're just trading on a much larger scale. These multinational corporations or these transnational corporations are going to have multiple facilities, and it's really hard to stay coordinated and stay in communication. And there's also going to be different time zones as well. So when some people are working, some of the production facilities are going to be closed and asleep, so it's hard to communicate with each other. It's going to be transportation costs. Not everything's made in Britain that we consume in Britain. So if it's made somewhere else, it's great. If it's made there more cheaply, maybe they've got a specialism in it, but if it's made in China, that's a long way to transport the product. So there's greater transportation costs, greater pollution as well from those increased transportation, and there's ethical considerations as well. Now, not every country in the world is as focused on ethics and treating people the way they should be treated, and making sure that people work in facilities that protect their human rights, that they're not bullied at work, that they are paid a fair wage, a living wage. And, just as we have issues in the UK where we think that some businesses might be a bit unethical, there's lots of businesses all around the world that are unethical as well. And if you're maybe trading with those businesses, there are ethical problems that could emerge. And then maybe customers don't like that, maybe they're unwilling to buy your products because of that, and maybe they could protest and boycott your product, refuse to buy it. And we can also get loss of jobs in the UK, so this is very poignant. This is Port Talbot Steel, Tata Steel actually, Tata are actually going to sell this business in Port Talbot, which is in Wales, because it's losing, they think, about £1 million a day. So it's not very profitable for Tata, but it's going to mean the loss of a huge number of jobs as well. And one of the reasons that they've not been able to make a go of this business and make this the steel business profitable is because Chinese steel is very, very cheap. For various reasons, but with our globalized economy, it means that yes, you've got a wider market, more people to sell to, but there's lots of foreign businesses that you now need to compete with as well. So it's greater competition, and sometimes this can lead to a loss of jobs, and this is going to be really devastating for the community of Port Talbot. So here's the specification objectives. Make sure that you're thinking about it with in relation to international and global expansions, because you probably wouldn't have thought about that when you were looking at your controlled assessment.